You're not going to believe what Doug Pederson had to say about the quarterback he drafted back in 2020, Jalen Hurts. Yes, he's on the other side of the football field this week, but look what the former Eagles Super Bowl winning head coach had to say about Jalen Hurts right now, heading into Eagles versus Jaguars. What's up, guys? Thomas Mott here. Welcome into the Thomas Mott Show here on a Friday as we get ready for Eagles and Jaguars. And really, that's one part of this whole matchup. The other part, the return of Doug Pederson. This is the guy who won the Super Bowl for the Philadelphia Eagles, and yet there's discussions about booing him versus cheering him. There's discussions about should the Eagles have fired him, should they not have. I think overall it worked out well for both parties because the Jaguars look pretty good. Talk about that in a video tomorrow. And the Eagles look pretty good with Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni. I'm going to be at the game. I'm cheering for Doug P. I'm excited for him to go ahead and come back to Philadelphia. Our first story of the day, as we jump into this Doug Pederson returning to Philadelphia story, is Doug's thoughts on the current state of the Eagles, and really Doug's thoughts on Jalen Hurts, because you forget that just a couple of years ago, it was Doug Pederson at the helm when they drafted Jalen Hurts in the second round of the 2022 or the 2020 NFL draft, and so this was the head coach that essentially signed off on drafting him, and I know there's arguments about Howie Roseman wanted to sign him, not Doug Pederson wanted to sign him. Either way, Doug was in that room when they picked Jalen Hurts, and in the end, it might be one of his greatest gifts to Philadelphia, not name a Vince Lombardi trophy. So, Bleeding Green Nation has the article here. We'll throw it up on your screen. It's a whole discussion about what Doug Pederson feels like and his upcoming return to Philadelphia regarding where things were left off, but most notably Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts. Now, the return to Philly is one thing. I think this is a little bit bloviated. I don't know if he's out here for like full revenge on, Doug Pederson is going to come out here and do everything he can to win. He does that every single week. Like, sure, there's a little bit of added incentive, but that's his job as a head coach. What I like is his thoughts on Jalen Hurts. And again, this coming from the head coach that was in the draft room when they took Jalen Hurts. Here's what he said, quote, "Nothing surprises me with Jalen. Just knowing the type of person he is. When the Eagles drafted him back in 2020, everything that you're seeing now is everything that we saw in him when we drafted him. Number one, he's a tremendous person. There's stability around him now with coaches." He would go on to say, "He's a sponge. He wants to learn. He wants to get better. He's a professional and he takes it serious. Those are things that you want out of your quarterback, out of your leader, out of our team." So no surprise that he's still doing that. And then further on, when asked about the overall success of Jalen Hurts through 3 games in 2020, did it shock him? Quote, "It just doesn't surprise that this is how well he's playing. He's prepared himself for this. And as I mentioned earlier, the stability around him and the success of that helps. I just hope that we can do that with our guy, Trevor Lawrence, down in Jacksonville." And they are doing that. If you've watched the Jaguars through the 3 games, they've looked pretty darn good. And again, we'll talk about that in a whole look ahead on tomorrow's video. One final quote from Dougie P here. I like his thoughts on his predecessor in Nick Sirianni, or his successor in Nick Sirianni. Quote, "You're seeing his leadership ability. He's an offensive guy. He's leading that team by example. He puts himself in a position to be successful just with the coaches around him. He leans on them, obviously for help and support, and he's a smart guy, and he understands ball. He understands his team, and that's the thing about it. I think it's a quality to be successful in this league as a head coach is understanding your players, and he does that. And he connects with them on a personal level, which is really good," end quote. What do we take from all of this? I think we take the fact that Doug Pederson's a really great guy. Doug Pederson was a fantastic coach for the Eagles, and you can argue is the greatest coach in Eagle history, and that might be a hot take because Andy Reid exists, but there's one Eagle coach who's led the team to actually hoisting a Vince Lombardi trophy. His banner hangs in Lincoln Financial Field to this day. It's Doug Pederson. And I know that he had kind of a falling out in the end, and we're not really sure if it was Doug versus Howie or Howie versus, Doug, or a combination of Carson Wentz versus Doug. We don't know. Maybe it was Doug Pederson who wanted Jalen Hurts, and it was Howie who wanted to stick with Carson Wentz. We don't know what went down. And for as weird as that was, I don't think we've seen a situation in the National Football League in a very long time where a breakup of that magnitude, a Super Bowl winning head coach gone less than 2 years after winning the Super Bowl, has turned out so well for both parties. Doug took a year off, was with the family, went ahead and reset, gets hired in Jacksonville, and instantly has become like the 5th most winning head coach in Jaguar history, passing Urban Meyer. He's already won more games than Urban Meyer did last year. And Philadelphia, they bring in an unknown in Nick Sirianni. They start an unknown in Jalen Hurts. And so far, through 3 weeks of the NFL season, it's worked out pretty darn well for them. And so both parties, again, looking like they're in pretty good shape. I'm excited to see Doug. I'm going to be there at the game, as I mentioned, with my roommate who's a Jaguar fan. He's pumped about Doug Pederson coaching his football team. I'm expecting a standing ovation for Doug Pederson. I think Eagle fans, we get this title of being ruthless, but in the end, I think we understand greatness and we appreciate what people do for us. And Dougie did something that no other head coach has ever done in bringing us Super Bowl 52. Okay, we'll keep going here on the Thomas Mott Show. There's a take from Emmanuel Acho coming up here in just a couple of minutes. He's on FS1. That might be the dumbest take in all of sports history regarding Jalen Hurts. We'll talk about that in just a second. And also our national story of the day, Dolphins versus Bengals was the game last night. Tua was hurt. A lot of drama in terms of the concussion protocol right now. We'll discuss that to go ahead and end today's show. First, though, I do want to mention a quick look at the injury report. There's a couple of players that have missed a couple of days in terms of, not being at practice. A.J. Brown has missed practice again. It's a personal matter. We don't know what. Personal matters can range, a wide variety of things. Expect him to be out there on Sunday. This is not, to me, a big deal in terms of actually playing. Not sure what's going on personally. We wish him well. But not playing does not seem like it's going to be a thing on Sunday. Not sure on Boston Scott. And all this discussion about Trey Sermon, we mentioned it on the show yesterday. Maybe this is where Sermon gets a couple of touches. He's only, he hadn't had one so far during his starting time in Philadelphia. I'm not sure if Scott's going to play or not, but he's been DNP and not at practice the past couple of days. I think Dickerson is a go with the foot, Maddox is a go with the ankle, and Williams is a go with the knee. And obviously you see Miles Sanders, Darius Slay, and Devontae Smith all upgraded to full participants with the hip back and the back for Smith, respectively. That's good news. Obviously those three are going to be out there, but I think most Eagles, if not everybody, is going to be good to go. The question for me right now is going to be the running back Boston Scott. Okay, I can't play you this video. It's on Twitter, and so you guys can obviously, go find it yourself, but I can at least show you the screen cap and explain what's going on regarding Emmanuel Acho's thoughts on Jalen Hurts. So Acho's an interesting guy. He's a Fox Sports, talking head guy, New York Times bestseller in terms of a writer, but he was an Eagle. He played in 20 games for Philadelphia, 33 tackles, retired after 2 NFL seasons. Not a big-time NFL player, but still did play in the NFL, and so hence, he's good at talking, and hence why he has a media job. That's what happens in the National Football League. If you played for any period of time, and you're good in front of a camera, think Dan Orlovsky, who's fantastic, but was not a very good NFL player, then you go ahead and get to be a national media correspondent, which, again, makes sense. I'm not dogging, I'm just saying that's how it works. Acho, though, had this take, and I can show you screen grabs of this from his show. I forget which one he's on FS1. It's like either the morning or the afternoon one. I haven't seen it, but either way, I watched this clip. His whole argument is, here are all the quarterbacks. You see on your screen here. These are all the quarterbacks that Jalen Hurts has faced throughout his career. And his main point is, Hurts has not beaten any of the good ones. So here's the overall list. And again, it's small. You got to kind of look at this. There are the fringe quarterbacks, the bad ones that Jalen Hurts has played. Bridgewater, Darnold, Jake Fromm. You go on here, Garrett Gilbert, Jared Goff. He talks about how he's 9-1 against the bad quarterbacks. Then he kind of moves over here and gets into the formidable, mediocre quarterbacks. And he says he's 2-2 against Derek Carr, Kirk Cousins, Jimmy G, and Matt Ryan. And then the franchise ones, Justin Herbert, Tom Brady, Pat Mahomes, and Dak Prescott, he's 0-5. And he tries to essentially downplay the start that Jalen Hurts has had so far this year. Now, you can't argue with these numbers. Straight up, if you were sitting next to Emmanuel Acho and you said, Emmanuel, this is ridiculous, he would say, Thomas, has he beaten a star quarterback? And your answer would be no, unless you consider Kirk Cousins to be a star quarterback, which most of us don't. But the problem with his argument is it takes out the entire idea of schedule. Right? It's not like the Eagles can schedule star quarterbacks every single week to see if they match up against Jalen Hurts. We talked about this. The Eagles' schedule this year is very, very easy. What Emmanuel Acho seems to forget, though, is that the eye test of Jalen Hurts this year is leagues better than the eye test of Jalen Hurts last year. This was a 2021 argument for Jalen Hurts because he could not beat any of the good players. He never beat Dak Prescott. He obviously got pummeled by Tom Brady in the wild card game down in Tampa. That's a fair argument last year. But the eye test of 2021 Jalen Hurts versus the eye test of 2022 Jalen Hurts is night and day difference. And so while Acho can have this take because right now every single major media outlet loves Jalen Hurts, and so Acho can go against the grain and be like, oh, well, maybe he's not actually that good. In reality, you can only play who's in front of you. And if the Eagles were to and will eventually face some good quarterbacks, I expect Jalen Hurts to continue to rise to the occasion because my eyes have told me that he has looked very, very good. The final thought on this, and we say, I always talk about eyes here on the Thomas Mott Show. Your eyes don't lie. We are not NFL coaches, whether you watch this show, whether you're me hosting this show, whether you're a blog writer, for one of the blog websites that we talk about here. We're not experts, but we have eyes, and you have eyes, and your eyes don't lie. They understand if you're watching a good player or a bad player. We all understand we're watching a great player right now in Jalen Hurts. If he keeps this up, that list of franchise quarterbacks he's never beaten, it's going to start to change, and he's going to start to beat a bunch of them coming up here, starting with, you can argue Kyler Murray in 2 weeks, Dak Prescott if he's healthy, week 6, then you play Aaron Rodgers in a couple of months. This is going to be fine. It's just funny to see somebody try to go against the grain and tell you that Hurts isn't that great because he hasn't beaten any good players, which is just ridiculous. Okay, what's not ridiculous before we get into the National League story of the day, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Welcome if you guys are brand new to the Thomas Mott Show. We try and talk about the Eagles and the NFL and just kind of have fun. It's my unfiltered thoughts here on the Thomas Mott Show. If you guys appreciate that, thumbs up. YouTube loves thumbs ups. I can't tell you guys enough. They love the thumbs up button, and be sure to subscribe. Okay, let's quickly mention from our National League story of the day, Dolphins versus Bengals. First off, the Bengals are back to being the Bengals. That's very, very clear. They're starting to run the football a lot better. Mixon had 24 carries. They're throwing the ball, and you're trying to find Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. Burrow was only sacked 1 time last night. Blah, blah, blah. Bengals look fine. That was expected, even though the 0-2 start was a little ugly. But you figure he had the appendectomy, and Joe Burrow didn't practice in preseason or training camp. This first month of the National League football, of the NFL for a lot of teams is the preseason, and so the Bengals are getting their stride. Quickly, the Dolphins are legit, and when they have Tua in there, they're a formidable team that you do not want to face because the scheme is great with Mike McDaniels. They have great weapons on the outside in Waddle and Tyreek Hill, and they have a fantastic defense. This is not a full indication of what went down last night, though, because Tua Tagovailoa got hurt, and before he got hurt, he was playing some really good football. What you're going to see in the media all day today is people absolutely ripping the Dolphins to shreds because it seemed like last week he had a concussion. And then it seemed like they rushed him forward to play on Thursday night. His head hit the ground again. It was a scary look with his body locking up in that kind of defense, neurological defense position, whatever you want to call it. And so people are naturally going to rip the Dolphins. I'm not going to say the Dolphins were in the right at all here, but you have to remember, when you have anger towards something like this, the look goes to the league. It does not go to the individual team. The individual team they have to follow league protocols. And unless they absolutely disregarded league protocols, which if that's the case, then they're going to get a massive, whether it's a fine or dock draft picks or some sort of massive indictment from the league. If they follow league protocols and an independent neurologist cleared Tua to play, that's on the independent neurologist and that's on the National Football League. I'm not saying the Dolphins are fully, cleared here, because even if an independent neurologist says you can play, maybe you make a wise decision and go, I don't think he should play on Thursday night because it's just so quickly after a concussion, clearly on Sunday. But they follow vigorous protocols. And if the vigorous protocols aren't good enough, that's up to the league to go ahead and fix and not up to the Dolphins to go ahead and police themselves. I know, again, should the Tua have played last night? Probably not. And Miami, in the end, can make that call. But if you're the Miami coaching staff, and you're Tua, and Tua's feeling fine after the concussion on Sunday, all signs look good. You clear your doctor's protocols because they have personal Dolphin doctors, and then an independent neurologist says, hey, you're good to go. What are you going to do? Say, maybe I shouldn't because I don't feel maybe something bad will happen. It's the league's fault here. And so obviously there should be anger, and obviously we're hoping and praying Tua's going to be fine, and it seems like he's going to be. They're probably going to keep him out of next week's game. This is a league issue. This is a concussion protocol given by the league that needs to be either further revamped or make it stricter, or maybe you just say people can't play after having a concussion confirmed last week. I'm not sure, but it's going to be interesting to see how the national media spins this story, and it's just important to note that these protocols come down from the league and they're not individual to each team. Either way, Tua shouldn't have played. I mean, that was very, very obvious from the start, but he did. The concussion happened, and now we'll see what the league does, whether it's an investigation or not, but this was a bad look overall for the NFL, less so for the Miami Dolphins, in my opinion. Okay, as I mentioned, I will be at the Jaguars-Eagles game on Sunday. Going to have a lot of fun at that one. I am going to go ahead and get you guys a look at the Jaguars tomorrow, because I think a lot of people are labeling tomorrow's game or the Sunday's game as a trap game. They're saying, oh my gosh, the Jaguars are so good, and Philadelphia's going to have their first loss of the year, and they're the only undefeated team, meaning they're going to lose. Are the Jaguars good? Yes. Is this a trap game, though? A home game in Philadelphia with this roster coming off of the win they had last week? No, it's not, and I'll dive into that coming up on tomorrow's show, so be sure to thumbs up and subscribe. That's it for today. Again, Doug Pederson's return. I'm pumped for it. Hopefully you guys are too. That's it for the Thomas Mott Show.